Welcome to the Post Shift Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC. What is happening, Post Shifters? Welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. This week's Post Shift shot is going to be a little bit different. I'm doing the topic of 5 things every owner and manager should know daily. With everything that's going on in BC right now, it's been very difficult for a lot of us. I know it's been a shitty fucking year, but in BC, especially right now, we've got these sort of weird, we're not locked down, but we're definitely not busy as we used to be. So I think we need to start looking at the minutiae of our businesses. And if you're looking at this or listening to this or watching this on YouTube, and you're like, well, I already know that. Well, then you don't need to watch this. You may get a little bit out of it, but you don't need to watch this. A lot of managers do know what all these numbers are going to be. A lot of people, and I'm going to say a lot of people because I've talked to a lot of clients, and a lot of clients do not know these numbers. They have no idea about these numbers. And if I go into a consulting gig, especially for financial strategy, I'll ask these 5 questions basically. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the owner or the manager will know what these numbers are. So let's kick it off. So first thing you need to know is your top line revenue. This is pretty easy. Like how much money did you make yesterday? So one number, how much money? But once we start going into deeper, is it projected or budgeted versus actual? So we're going to get into why this is important. So what did you project to make yesterday? You should have a budget of how much you make a daily, per day, over the week. You should have a weekly budget, daily budget per day, whether it be Monday or Friday, a weekly budget, depending on what time of the year it is, and then a monthly budget. And then all this stuff really comes back to, I did one of these about a month and a half ago now. What is your break-even point? Basically, everything we're going to talk about in the next 5 slides is all about what is your break-even point. If you haven't calculated this, the next couple of numbers make no sense. So what is your projected budgeted versus actual? So you've worked out your break-even point per month. Okay, so how many days a week are you open? Okay, so what do you need to make every day to break even? Okay, so here's the sort of budget. Like this break-even point is probably the most important number that you need to have to go forward. Now, when you calculate your break-even point, this is actually a really great tip from Sean Finter. Put a percentage on top of your break-even point as a buffer. So your break-even point is you making 0 money. Let's put 10% on top of that, 15% on top of that, as a buffer. And then that trickles down to all your budgets, all your costs, everything. So what is your break-even point? You've got to calculate this. I'm going to put a link in the bio so you can go and see how I calculate that. It's about 5 or 6 different things you got to sort of click off and work out. But this break-even point is super important because it really, 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 really pushes this. It's all well and good to say, I can do 100 covers on a Friday at 35, 40, 50 bucks a head. I'm good. But does that even cover your break-even point? This is very important. Like people assume that, especially restaurant people that have been doing it for years and years and years, think that, I can do this dollar amount, I can do this many covers, and I'm going to be good. But that may not even cover your rent. So these are the little things you need to sort of look at. Really, when you wake up first thing in the morning, you should know how many covers you did and what your per head spend was. Per head spend is super easy. How much your sales were by how many covers you were. Now, covers, this is really important because this is another thing that gets sort of slid, especially by managers. This sort of gets like slid and like screwed up. And it's happened to me on a number of venues when I've gone in. I'm like, okay, so, well, how many covers do you do? Well, we don't know. We just do a table and then hit 1. I'm like, okay, so a table is 1 cover. And like, yeah, we don't actually count how many people are at the table. We just do 1. And so it just completely screws up your per head spend. You don't even know how many covers you're doing. You don't know what days, like if you look back a year ago, why did you do 150 covers that day? What was going on? Do you need to schedule more staff for that day? Is that Saturday a big event in town that you just didn't click, and why? So like per head spend, your cover count is very, very important. So managers, make sure your staff are clicking in exactly how many people are at the table. They should be doing this anyway, but you would be surprised and shocked how many places I go into, and they're not. They're just doing 1. So you don't even know what your covers are. If you don't know what your covers are, you don't know what your per head spend is. Why is your per head spend important? Because that's also a projected, budgeted number. You should be budgeting how much your per head spend should be. Now, if you're a restaurant, you should be going, okay, my per head spend should be appy, main, dessert, 2 drinks. That should be sort of round about where you should be. That's your sort of bear market. Your bull market should be no appy, like just a main and a bottle of wine, a cheap bottle of wine. So this is the sort of things you work out. Now, per head spend and cover count sort of evolve and continue to get better and change over a course of a restaurant's life or a bar's life. The first 2 years really should set the tone. Now, you can do it all in your business plan and organize how much you're going to make and all this sort of stuff. But that first 2 years really sets the tone about what is your actual per head spend? What is your actual cover count? Now, I'm going to harp on a little bit more about this. I've had many restaurateurs and we're doing great. We're doing the increase of sales last year. I'm like, okay, well, how many covers are you doing? Well, I don't really know, but our top line revenue is this. I'm like, that's fantastic, but you put your prices up. So are you actually making the same amount of money? So covers is very important for me anyway, because covers and per head spend are equally as important. A high per head spend, maximizing what you get from the guest is super important, mainly because it means that you're maximizing what the staff can do for the little amount of work. We'll come into that with labor in a second. Covers is important to me. If you're making the same amount of money as you did last year, but you put your prices up 25-30%, that is a red flag for me. And I'll tell you why, because it means that you're doing less covers. You're doing the same top end revenue, your sales, your per head spend is up, but you're doing less covers. Does that mean that you're less busy? Are you doing like less people? Are you maximizing that? That's just great, but you should be increasing how many covers you do over time to increase that top line revenue. So revenue breakdown, this is super important. I don't think a lot of people do this as much as they should. Obviously, food and drink is an easy one. Let's go food and drink. Awesome. Let's look at food. Appetizers, mains, desserts, add-ons is a big one. We used to do that at Moxie's a lot. Add-ons, drinks, wine, beer, cocktails, liquor, so on and so forth. Well, liquor would be with cocktails, but so on and so forth. Because then you know where your big breakdown is. So purchasing, take Clive's for instance, we're a cocktail bar. Our liquor breakdown is massive compared to the rest of our categories. So it means I'm going to be ordering more of that. But my wine and my beer is very, very, I wouldn't say low, but it's lower than what I'd like it to be. But it means that it influences my purchasing for the next week. So tap beer. If your total sales are only 5% beer, are you going to invest in 4 kegs for the next week? That might take 2.5-3 months to go through. These are the little things you need to look at. Your purchasing, your cost budgets, your marketing. Like, do you do a happy hour special for tap beer? Do you do a happy hour special for wine? Do you do something that's deficient? That goes into the next thing. Training is a big one. Are you not selling as much wine or appetizers or desserts or espresso coffee or all these little add-on bits that can increase that per spend because the training is not there? Do the staff not know how to talk about wine? Do the staff not know how to talk about beer? Do the staff not know how to talk about cocktails, all the appetizers, all the features, all the add-ons? Are they a little bit gun shy at pushing an add-on? Do they know how to read the table to know when they can push and when they have to pull back? This is a big one. Like pushing and pulling back is a big one. Like some tables just want to order what they want to order and move on. Some tables are open to suggestions. So that training actually comes into a little bit of psychology and salesmanship. Deficient categories. If you're a restaurant and for some reason your appy sales have like dropped through the floor, you may be still purchasing the same amount of product and still having that expenditure in the hopes that appies are going to pick up again. So why is appies dropped down? Why have desserts all of a sudden dropped off? Why isn't no one ordering coffee? So on and so forth. It also gives a big open look into contribution versus profit. There's a lot of things that come into contribution versus profit. You've got a big steak, $50, $60, $60, $70 steak that may be at 40% cost, or you got a hamburger that's 18% cost. Which do you want to sell? Do you want to sell one steak for $50, $60, or do you want to sell 10 hamburgers? So I know that's someone's probably trying to say that doesn't make sense, but like you understand my metaphor here. It comes back into that labor cost and how it's going to work out. But these are all things that you should really be knowing about, and you should know about the percentages and those budgets around those percentages. So if you're saying food is going to be 50% of my sales, awesome. What's the breakdown for that 50%? Drinks are going to be 50% of my sales. Okay, cool. What's that breakdown? These are all things because your purchasing budget also comes into play. At the end of the week, if you've sold 7% wine, 7% of your total sales is wine, then you don't want to go and spend 25% of your purchasing budget on wine. There's something that missed there. It's expenditure that you don't need to be putting out. So labor costs. How many dollars did it cost to make how many dollars? This is pretty simple. Most labor costs for most restaurants and bars is about 20 to 35%. I know this is going to be very interesting for across the board because everybody's got a different business plan. Everybody's got a slightly different dynamic for business. So everybody, like a dive bar that only runs like 3 staff on a Friday when you've got 120 seats, is probably going to have much lower labor than a fine dining restaurant. So 20 to 35% is sort of around the industry standard with outliers on both sides. So keep that in mind. Labor costs is equal sales divided by labor, get your labor percentage. Now, that's where we get the labor percentage. You want to do your back of house labor and your front of house labor separate. And even if you can, throw your manager salaries in there too. There's a few spreadsheets out there that sort of calculate this. I've got a few myself. If you want them, I've got my email address at the very end. So just hit me up with an email and I'll send you over my sort of rough sort of sheets. It changes from venue to venue. But really it's just name, hourly rate, and then it adds up the hours as it goes through. Then you put the sales in and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. But back of house and front of house are very, very important. And then your total. So again, you've got your total percentage. You want to break it down. You want to understand why your back of house is running higher labor. Oh, the prep guy dropped like X amount of waste, well, by accident, dropped a big pot of something and had to make it from scratch again, spend another hour and a half doing it, plus that waste cost, which we haven't even got into with an inventory cost. But these are all little things that you want to sort of sit. And if you do it every day, it means that you can control it every day. There's going to be days when you're just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like this is just high because yesterday was fucking dead. We were ready for a busy Friday night and boom, it was quiet. So labor is really important for front of house, back of house. And if you've got salaried managers, it's always nice to have a salaried manager section there as well. You just cut up their hours, like their salary per day, slide it in, put it against sales, and away you go. These all come back into budgets, and where your budgets come from, your break-even point. So slide back up if you want to know about the break-even point again, because that's super important. Cost of goods. How many dollars did it cost to make how many dollars? So again, this is super important because cost of goods is very important because you can literally go out of business if you fuck up your cost of goods. Your cost of goods is super important. Easy way to do it is cost of item divided by sale price times 100. COGS a good percentage. So your COGS should be around about 20 to 40%. Again, industry standard 20, 40%. Bars obviously run much lower cost of goods because of alcohol, liquor, wine, so on and so forth. Not so much wine in BC, but definitely liquor. Food cost is much higher depending on what you serve. Serving burgers all day long, great. You're going to have a really low percentage. Serving wine all day long, steaks all day long, maybe your COGS of goods are going to be a little bit different. But this is sort of where it sort of sits. So this is super important because, again, this is more of a weekly number. I wouldn't expect you to calculate this every single day. But I have talked about cost of goods and inventory management and stuff like that in other podcasts. This one's one of those where you've got a weekly number that you should be trying to tackle. I do my inventory monthly at Clive's. It's a pain in the ass. Moxie's, I did it weekly. If you'll find at the end of the month that your costs are really out of whack, like losses and really high costs, I would switch to weekly as soon as possible because you can sort of nip it in the bud a little bit quicker. It gives you a couple of days to sort of buffer out, okay, why is it? Then you have to go back and every quarter, I always do it every 3 months, go through and recost absolutely everything because things change money really, really quickly. So cost of goods, cost of items, all that sort of stuff. So that's my weekly post-shift shot, a little bit different this week. If you want to know anything in regards to furthering this conversation, just let me know. There's my website, there's my email. Drop me an email. Always happy to. info@soolhospitality.com or www.soolhospitality.com. Come and check it out. I'll put this up on YouTube. I'll put it up on my podcast. Hope you guys have a good week. If you've got any questions, just hit me up via Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and I'll be up for chatting. So have a good week, guys. I'll chat to you real soon. Bye. Thanks for listening, Post Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.